Big headline today in medical news, Olivia Munn's breast cancer diagnosis. What makes someone high risk? Let's talk about it. There's something called a breast cancer risk assessment tool. It's known as the GAIL Model. And you can look this up online, and it helps to provide an actual numerical risk for lifetime risk of breast cancer and breast cancer diagnosis in the next 5 years. It does have its limitations, particularly for Black women, for women born outside of the country, particularly Hispanic women born outside of the country, but it is what we use in medicine to stratify a woman's individual risk in a more precise way. So it asks questions like, how old were you at your first period? How old were you when you had your first live birth? Have you had any breast biopsies? Have you been told after a biopsy that you have something called atypical hyperplasia? Do you carry a BRCA1 or BRCA2 genetic mutation? Your race? Things like that. Very simple to go down this questionnaire online and then look at your numbers. Then if that number is high, particularly over 20% in general, different type of surveillance for screening is generally recommended, and that involves generally a breast MRI plus some other forms of imaging. Remember, mammogram is still the gold standard, but a mammogram does not detect all cancers, particularly in younger women or in women with dense breasts, which is the majority of women. So that's where we fall to other types of imaging modalities, like an MRI, usually in addition to a breast ultrasound or sonogram. Women should start talking to their doctor, and generally this is their OBGYN or primary care provider, whenever they see that person. So women in their 20s can talk to their healthcare provider about their risk of breast cancer, particularly if they have a family history, which is generally considered to be a first-degree relative. So that's a mother, a daughter, or a sister who's been diagnosed with breast cancer. Then we have to remember that the guidelines for screening pertain to the woman at average risk, keyword being average. That's the problem, because the vast majority of women are considered average risk until the day they get a diagnosis of breast cancer. If you have a first-degree relative with a history of breast cancer, or if you carry a genetic mutation, or if you go through the GAIL model and your doctor tells you you're at higher risk, then you should fall into a different category in terms of screening. Right now, it's recommended that a woman of average risk undergoes her first mammogram at age 40. But again, if you have a mother who was diagnosed with breast cancer at, let's say, age 42, the general clinical practice recommendations are for that woman to start screening 10 years earlier. I think the key takeaways when you hear a story like Olivia Munn is that it's not one size fits all, that education and awareness can absolutely be life-saving, and that with breast cancer, the earlier you make the diagnosis and can treat it in general, the better the prognosis and survival will be. And in this day and age, in this country, 90% of women diagnosed today with breast cancer will survive, which is good news.